I actually do free critiques and readings for your story every single Saturday on my live stream.
My name is sacred. I am Butternut. You want to minimize the chance of a reader being pulled out of the story and being like, wait, what's going on? Forget dropping to the drop zone. I'm dropping you guys now, but drop or die. I would go harder in on the language that you use when describing the technology, the mech, the air units. In a maze of unending grid-laid streets with no avenue of exit in sight, when I wake up from dreaming, sometimes I wake up silently screaming. Add or adjust some of the language so it matches Boschian landscape, mirror world, shadowland.
Or if you're looking to hire an editor for your next book because you're ready to take it to the next level, I do full editing services where we'll focus on character.
The man froze for a moment, then nodded. Wolf, me, Wolf. I want to know more about each of the characters. Wolf makes me suspect that he's either father, a pirate, the evil antagonist, like the capricious nature of life's tapestry. You want to highlight and elevate that relationship between the two of you, that meeting moment.
World building.
I want more of this. Rhyming tone is music to the ears. I saw you're dead inside. That something happened I never knew about. And all those lies, loneliness, and us having to cope with it, relate to it, understand it, or fight against it is a very powerful message.
Dialogue.
He was surprised that this woman, of all people, was giving him a pep talk, because sometimes when we have characters who speak too much, it's easy for someone to tune out if they're reading it. And this is a really interesting world, and I don't want people to tune out on your work.
And structure.
Ben jumped up a little disoriented and grabbed his gun. Running to the stairs, he heard men yelling, "Who else is down there?" During this shootout, I would just add a little more detail, make this a little longer, because this shootout is fun. This is like the action sequence of like, kill the bad guy, pow pow.
So that way your book will be all ready to be published. And let's take it to market.
And welcome to the Story and Critique Show, a free opportunity for writers in the community to get their work read for free. I do live readings and critiques. This is an excellent community, and it is a lot of fun. Thank you for dropping by the stream today. This is a weekly Saturday show where we will be here every single week, both myself and the writing community, to help make you a better writer, and maybe, just maybe, give you a little inspiration and motivation in the process. Welcome, Bethany. Welcome to the stream. And Atomic, welcome, my friend. Thank you for all of your support. We have quite a number of stories today, and I am so excited to get into it. But before we get started, if you're watching on the replay, I got you covered. When the stream ends, time codes will be added to the video itself. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can actually go back to the beginning and you can hop to the parts of the video that bring you the most value. So let's say that you got a critique on your story today and you're like, I need to hear that again just to make sure that I heard that right. Or if you have questions, you can hop to the part of the video that brings you the most value. So make sure you stay tuned for our replay audience. All right, so we have the live story reading and critique show. I am so excited to get into it. And by the way, make sure that you stay around till the end. We'll be doing our live writing sprint for the day. I'm working on Last Scarecrow. You know what? I got this as, what are we? We got the Scarecrow, the Pixie, the Bear, the Snake, and the Skunk are in the Graveyard of the Last. We're about 75% of the way through the story, so stay tuned and we'll see how that writing sprint goes for the day. All right, so who do I have on deck first? I have Lorelei. So Lorelei Chrisp, I got you here on deck. Just let me know if you're here in the audience, Lorelei. Awesome, and I'm going to get your story queued up for you. So before we get started, and while I'm setting that up, let me just go over this process a little bit. And let me make sure that I'm pulling up my screen correctly. All right, perfect. So essentially, there's a couple of housekeeping rules. First off, I accept stories in the order that they're received. So if you've submitted your story anytime from the previous Saturday, I'll add that to the queue, and then I'll give each story roughly 20 minutes. Now, the story, I'll try to do a 10-minute reading and then a 10-minute critique. I try to give each story the same amount of time. Sometimes I'll go a little over if it's like right at the end, but I'm really trying to get in the habit of making sure that it's a fair and consistent experience for any writer who submits their story or resubmits their story for later shows. So that's always super exciting. And then the formatting. So a lot of the times writers will send me their stories, and sometimes it'll be Word documents, PDFs, Google Docs, all manner of displays. I adjust the formatting for all stories into Comic Sans font, and I blow up the wording so that way you as the viewer can read along if you would like to as I'm going through the reading process. And it just makes it so much easier. So a lot of times the page count on a lot of these stories are going to be way off because I've had to blow everything up so that way we could actually see it. And if you see me highlighting as I'm going, I'm actually highlighting just to make notes for myself. So nothing good or bad by highlighting. It's a point of reference for my own reference. Hey, what's up, Catan? Welcome to the stream, my friend. Glad to have you over here, my dude. All right. And then, all right. So let me throw up my stream. I have it all set here. Let's see. I think I forgot to add my timer. All right, so we got a 20 minutes on the clock for the story and critique timer. Perfect. And then the last bit of housekeeping. Awesome. So I have this here, and I will throw up my screen. So the last bit of housekeeping, if you are, let's see, I have to add that to the stage. Perfect. Here we go. So if you're here in the audience, if you're here in the active audience in the community, as I'm reading along with the stories, if there's something that really stands out to you, something that you really like, don't worry. Don't hesitate to drop a comment. Let them know that there's a piece of it that really brings value to you. Or let's say I'm doing the critique itself and you're like, something really stands out. Feel free to drop a comment and share in a way that's kind, something that you think could be improved upon in the story. Sometimes I'll touch upon it myself. Other times I'll just let it go, knowing that the writers whose story that I'm working on are probably going to be checking out the comments as well. Now, when I'm doing critiques, I generally I break the elements of creative writing into these 5 distinct areas: character development, world building, dialogue, plot, and structure. I find it easiest when I'm doing critiques if there's opportunities or things I like, breaking out into the things that work and then the things that don't work. So that way, when you're working on your story yourself, it gives you a clear frame set on like, okay, maybe the story works or maybe something sucks about it, but what about it sucks? Because this makes it easier for you to identify in your own writing process. All right, beautiful. So I got that one all set. Let me get Lorelei's story already, and I got the timer here. Perfect. And we are all set here. So Lorelei, I got your story. Let's see. Hey Jared, I'm working on my 2nd chapter and couldn't make it for today. I'm feeling bad as I'm unable to work as I should. You know what, Catan? That's actually totally no worries. You've been submitting pieces of your story nearly every week. So what I actually want you to do is I want you to appreciate yourself. I want you to appreciate yourself because you've been doing a lot of writing. And the fact that you've been doing as much writing as you have as consistently and editing on a week by week basis, you should be so proud of yourself. So sometimes when like school gets busy or work does, sometimes you need to just give yourself like a breather for a week. And we'll totally be here. I'm streaming every single Saturday. So submit it for next weekend, my man. No worries. But thanks for the heads up. I appreciate it. And by the way, if you want, your story read, make sure to send an excerpt to the creativeghostwriter@gmail.com. I will add submissions as I go. Today I have about 6 to 8, so we'll see what we can get through, and we'll go story by story. All right, beautiful. So I am all set here. I think I have my screens set. All right, perfect. And I am all set for Lorelei's story. So we have a creative writing story from Lorelei Chrisp. Thanks so much for submitting this, Lorelei. And then so y'all know, I don't do any read-throughs of the stories prior to the stream. So that way it keeps the reading experience as fresh as possible. All right. Creative Writing Story by Lorelei Chrisp. Scene 1, Amani's POV. Bullets zip past our heads, small little bee-sounding rounds that puncture the wall in front of us. Matsi running just ahead of me. We duck behind cover, slamming our backs against the crates. I have 2 mags left for my rifle, and my pistol is out of ammo. Adjusting my scope grief is a weight in my stomach. Matsi peeked the corner, shooting at our assailants, and as he went to reload, I covered him. My bullet made contact with the man's arm, sending him backward as muffled screams filled the air. If I could get another angle, I could finish him off. For me! I shouted to Matsi over the array of bullets being shot at us. He peeked the corner and began to return fire as I got a running start. Dashing across the alley of the ship bay, a huge cargo crate provided us with cover. I slide the last stretch of the opening when something stinging hot shoots into my thigh. I make it just behind the crate and let the scream slip through my teeth. My trembling hands come to the bullet hole, clean through my leg, which means I don't have to worry about it still inside the wound. I shifted, trying to aim my sniper at the bastard that hit me, but Matsi's voice was stern. Stay behind cover, lass! You've been shot! He barked at me, his Russian accent heavy and demanding. I let my shoulder slump as he joined my side, thankfully untouched. His eyes darted back and forth as he proceeded what to do. Taking his belt from his waist, he shoved it into my mouth. Bite down. This is going to hurt. And try not to make so much noise, he ground out. Taking his knife, he took out the torch we had used to burn a hole through one of these very crates. He doused the blade in flame until it was a bright orange. I closed my eyes tight and bit down into the leather. He pressed the blade onto the wound, a grunt escaping me as it burned my flesh, cauterizing it. He gave no warning as he pressed it to the other side. My grunt turned into a scream, and he clamped a hand over my mouth, muffling the noise. I grew lightheaded as he pulled away, dropping the belt from my teeth. Stay with me. Stay with me. He shook me once, but roughly enough to snap me back to reality. We were still being chased. I don't think I can walk, Matsi. I breathed. It took effort just to speak. My leg was throbbing and burning at the same time. Tears flowed freely down my cheeks as I focused on staying awake. Quickly, he strapped the belt around my thigh tight, cutting off the circulation, and I grunted through the pain as he hoisted me over his shoulder. As he carried me, everything within my body was begging to go to sleep. He kept a good pace, and I was surprised he could carry me, both our armored vests and his gun, all at the same time. His breathing was so heavy, and I could tell his throat was closing up from the wheezing noises that grew louder and louder. They're following us, I breathed out, almost tempted to tell him to leave me behind. I could see their figures weaving in and out of the crates as he ran forward. Suddenly, he stopped, placing me on the crate. He pulled out his Uzi and hid behind the corner. I kept my breathing as quiet as possible as we both listened for footsteps. 3 of them stepped out into the clearing, exposing themselves completely. Motzi stepped out, firing at them. A bullet hit his vest, and then 2 more, tipping him back, but he didn't stop. Motzi! Panic gripped my chest as bullets sprayed past him. A bullet caught him in his shoulder, but it's as if he didn't even feel it. An aggressive roar came from him as he tackled the last man. He stabbed his knife into the man's gut before rising slowly. He staggered back to me with crimson blood dripping from his mouth. Do you think you could stand now? He sat next to me with his back against the crate. His brow was split clean open, and a trail of blood trickled down his face as he winced in pain. Are you okay? I leaned forward, but quickly leaned back as the pain in my leg grew worse. He stood up, holding his hand out for me to take. He hoisted me up, and my legs almost gave out as I stood. He spit a clot of blood to the side, wincing again as we staggered side by side. I think I'll be okay. Things worse than a normal shot. It's coated with something. His footing faltered, but he caught himself and we kept forward. He took the comm from his belt and spoke into it softly. This is Reaper, requesting backup. We've taken fire. Need medical assistance. His voice began to fade away, like he was getting farther from me. But my fingers were still desperately clinging to his vest. He wasn't the one fading. I was. The last thing I heard was Motzi's voice forming around the words. I could barely make out. I can't lose you too. Scene 2, Amani's point of view. Hector swayed on his feet, no doubt due to the 7 glasses of whiskey in his system. A silly smile was stuck on his face as he gazed at me, and I couldn't help but giggle. The front door was open wide, and the sound of the pouring rain was all I could hear. I strode over to the threshold, sitting down at the bottom of the stairs, letting the rain drizzle through my hair and soak my clothes. I stared out at the large field with nothing but grass for a few yards in each direction. For a while, I had wished the trees were closer to the house, but now I liked the open space. Most of the house was made with reinforced glass, and on days when it rained like this, sometimes I would just watch the water glide across the glass. He had trouble sitting down, but Hector was by my side shortly after, reeking of alcohol, his stature taking up much of the space. You like the rain? He said, this almost sounding amused, his intoxicated voice so much softer than his alternative. Yes. Ever since a young girl, I've loved the rain, especially in July. I pushed back memories, good and bad. I love it when it rains in July. Despite the rain, which slowly grew heavier, I lifted my eyes towards the clouds, their hue a dark purple as the sun set over the horizon. Goosebumps formed over my arms, along my back, as the cold water continued to douse me. Hector took a hold of my soaking hair in his fingers, examining the darker shade it had taken from the water. He began to twist strands in and out of each other, and it took me a moment to realize he was braiding it. Hector, you can braid? I tried to keep the astonishment from my voice as he kept going, creating one of the prettiest tight braids I had ever seen. The rain suits you. He ignored my comment and let his words sink in, trying to understand what he meant. He loved to play word games on the occasion, but I wasn't sure what this was. His own shirt hugged his form as he started another, twisting the strands in and out. Thunder struck suddenly, making me jump in my skin, and I settled as the lightning shadowed its partner in their dance. Yes, The rain suits you. So pretty and full of life, yet dangerous and loud when need be. His eyes rested on the stone sidewalk that led to the driveway as he released my hair. I watched as he dug into his pocket, pulling out an engraved knife. Black dragons danced across its handle, brandishing red flames from their lips, frozen in place. Dagger was a better fit for the beautiful blade he held in his fingers. He handed it to me. The blade, much lighter than I had thought. For this? Is this for me? I asked, sliding my finger across the blade. Receiving a small cut from its sharp edge, he nodded. His face seemed conflicted. I've done many bad things against my own will. Things no true man would be proud of. And when the time comes, when you have your chance, that is the blade I want you to use. Hector's voice was the softest I've heard it sound, like he was accepting fate and destiny into his soul. The two parts of his sentence didn't seem to fit together in my mind. Use it for what? My voice was but a whisper as I forced it from my mouth, so confused and a little frightened at the way his mood had turned. But he only smiled, leaning in to kiss me with sorrow in his eyes. He knew I didn't like this, and yet he did it anyway, not seeming to care. He pulled away, shaking his head at me, like it should be obvious what he was talking about. This is the knife I want you to use when you cut my heart out. He took the handle with my hand still encasing it and held it to his chest, where his heart rested. The smallest touch made his skin open and blood seep through his shirt from the small cut, but he never flinched. What makes you think I would do that given the chance, or that I'll have a chance at all? I couldn't help but throw in the second question, as I recalled how long I'd been stuck here. His smile grew, and his eyes filled with something I could only call love. All right, and I will end the reading there. I will do this to keep my place. All right, first off, wow, that was a really, really well told action story. That we could tell the first scene, so we had two completely different styles. I think this is a perfect example of in storytelling, how do we put scenes back to back when we have a high scene that relies on a lot of action and keeping the progression of the character and the journey in the moment, and then using a second scene, which is clearly going kind of in the romantic direction. It's a little bit more like I can't tell if it's a cross. It might be about to go into romance. I was actually kind of curious. It kind of came across as he was like a mentor for a second, but then it started having this like romantic undertone. And I was just curious towards will you be until the day I die? He asked me this. Yeah, okay, yeah. So it's definitely a lover scene. Okay. I wanted to make sure it's definitely a love scene. Okay. All right. So overall, very, very well done. Lorelei, like that was a really cool piece of writing. Wow. I would say that my favorite moments, I would say the things that worked very well for this story. I would say the world building was very, very on point, especially for the action scene. Very great job. The Your use of description, so I would say the structure and the world building were by far the strongest. This feels like this is a story that's probably ready for either a line edit or a developmental edit. Very, very great work. This is super cool. All right, and let me just check in on the chat. Okay. And so, by the way, chat community, what did you guys think of the story? Was there any part of this story that you really enjoyed the most? We had the clear action sequence, and then we had the very clear, we kind of got like halfway through into this little like romance thing, which was kind of cool. All right. So, let's go into some of the specific moments of what works and what doesn't. There's a couple opportunities for it. So overall, I would say one of the greatest things is the action used to keep us in the present moment is done so well. I feel like I'm cemented. I feel like I'm ground, and I know exactly what's going on between the gunfight, them shooting back at each other, between the main character and Matsi. It's very cool. I'm like, I absolutely loved it. I don't usually read these this might be more of an action romance. I don't usually go this style as much personally, but I was very intrigued and very pulled into the story. Let's see. I would say an opportunity. So this is scene one. Now, this just depends on whether this is the start of the book, the start of just this section of the story. I think what I was missing from the beginning was I needed some type of grounding element on the main character. I could tell they're in a gunfight, and this first recommendation, this could entirely be subjective, but this first section, I think I had a clear idea of her and Matsi, but I didn't really know who she is. Now, is if this is in the middle of the story and this precedes like chapters where you've already developed her character, then ignore this comment. But if this is the start of the story, and especially because you said scene one, so this leads me to believe that this is near the beginning. I just need a little bit of grounding in who is my protagonist. Right now, I feel like I know a little bit more. I know more about Matsi in this first section than I do about her. I feel like I get more character development from her in scene two during the romance scene. If I were to do this as a short story, I think I would actually almost interweave the two scenes. I think I well actually because I like the action. The action is very intriguing. No, okay, actually take that back. I wouldn't interweave these. I think what I would do is I would just add a little bit of description on who she is, either who she is or who they're fighting. Because I know they're in a gunfight, and the individual actions of them getting shot, that was clear. The individual actions of what they were doing to the other people was clear. But right now I have no clue who the assailants are. And that's all right. You don't actually need to talk about who the assailants are. But because this is the beginning of the story, the foreshadowing for it works fine. Let's see. I would say, let's zip past. So I would say what would help is because I want to be centered around who my protagonist is. So, and I mean, we have Amani's point of view here. Now, because this is in parentheses, I'm guessing this is an editor's, that's more like a writer's note. I like almost want to know who is Amani. Bullets that pass. I feel like I'm so well adjusted in the action. I would almost include maybe like one or two sentences of interiority right here. So that way I could be cemented in who is Amani, right? Whether I get a very brief description of like, oh, I look down at my like Navy uniform and I'm in a war to protect the president of the United States, right? You could do whatever you want. That's just an example. But I need a little bit more on why they're fighting. And you don't have to go too in depth, but I need some clues so that way I can be better cemented in this moment, this scene. You do such a good job of the action. Don't change the action. Layer on a little bit of it's a mix of world building and character development. So that way your reader is guaranteed to be hooked because you want them to be connected to your character. The action is interesting. You hook people to the action, but you invest them in the character. So that would be the thing that I would do. Because right now, just from the scene, what I know about the two of them is that her and Matsi are in a gunfight and they both get shot. To aim my sniper at the best, I shifted trying to, and so the main character is a sniper, right? So we know that she's a sniper. What if she's a sniper? Then how come she's so close to the action? Right? That's my question. My assumption with snipers is that they're at a distance, they're outside of the field of battle because they got to take pop shots at people. They got to lay down the law from a distance. So then I think this is a great opportunity for me to even if I get a brief of like, well, if she's a sniper, how come she's right there? I like this. This was so funny in the reading. I started doing I think I started doing an Australian accent because I heard Lass. I'm like, all right, let's do it, Lassie. And then I'm like Russian. I'm like, shit, I can't do Russian. Oh my goodness. By doing these readings, I'm gonna have to improve at my my capability to do accents, apparently. Let's see. What else? But this is gonna hurt and try not to make so much noise. Seas to burn. Yeah, so once again, like all these descriptions are so good. You do such a great job. It's really just I need to know more about the character and a little bit more about this situation, and that will really make this piece shine. Yeah, I was such a fan of your description. I felt so pulled into the action itself. I felt like the word choice that you use and the description was just very believable. So like you should be really proud of yourself because doing an action scene well in a story is hard to do. So really great work on that. Okay, so let me hop over to the romance scene real quick. I like that I actually got more description about Amani. I started getting a little bit more interest or a little bit more background about her. Hector was by my side shortly after, reeking of alcohol, his stature taking up much of the space. The thing that I was unclear about in this scene was is Hector a romance? What's the I'm blanking on the word. Is Hector the love? Is Hector the love interest, or is Hector a love interest? Let's see. Let's see. And then Hector. Let's see. And then Hector was freaking. Yeah. So I like the description. I think what I need is we just need a little bit more. I think I need some type of physical action or indicator earlier on in the scene that shows is if she's romantically attracted to Hector. I think that's what I'm missing. I think by the end, once they start doing the knife thing, like, okay, that was a little bit clearer. Even if it's like, oh, the way that she looked in his the way that she looked in his beautiful skin with love or something. Let's see. So at the large field. And I loved your rain metaphors. I love using weather as an aspect of world building. Absolutely love it. And oh, as a side note, and this could have just been okay, you had this in the first part. So this was probably just a formatting thing. Just making sure that the beginning of paragraphs are tabbed. That could have been me from my side. And once it's your use of description, right? Your use of language is so well done. Thunderstruck suddenly, making me jump in my skin, and I settled as the lightning shadowed its partner in their dance. That's just really cool. Although that needs to be its, but yeah. So really great use of description, and that brings us to the end of our time. That is all that I got for you today. There's a couple other things I would touch on, but I think those are a little bit more line editing things. So yeah, definitely a really interesting story. Lorelei, thank you so much for sharing. That was super cool. Thanks so much for that. That was awesome. I was like, I definitely got a lot of enjoyment out of that. And awesome. Let's see what we got in the chat. All right. It looks like everyone's on caffeine today. Cheers to all of you. I got catitude. There you go. Awesome. So cheers to y'all. All right. Perfect. So let's see. We're all on the caffeine and the sugar, which is great. Perfect thing for a Saturday. And it looks like we're talking about tagging. Yeah. So on What's interesting, so because all of you guys are coming from different platforms, because we talked about tagging. Let's see. I don't want to bring this up. So it looks like we had a couple things of whether or not to use the @ symbol and tagging with people, because we're going through StreamYard, and StreamYard, we actually stream to 5 different platforms. So I stream to YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, LinkedIn, and X. Welcome. Welcome if you're one from one of those. You actually don't need to worry about the @ symbol. I think what I do like about it is it might just highlight a little bit for somebody else who like might not be as familiar, might not be paying attention, especially if there's a lot of comments going through. So I actually really appreciate that you guys are trying. I think the @ symbols work well on Facebook. I'm pretty sure @ symbols work well on Facebook, but I don't think @ symbols a tag in if you're on YouTube. Yeah, YouTube or LinkedIn it won't, but I think Facebook, X, and Twitch it might, I believe. Let's see. All right, perfect. So, I hope you all enjoyed the story. I feel like we had some really great moments of that. Lorelei, thank you so much for sharing. Now, who do I have on deck? I got Glide. So, Glide, Fang, we got Chasing the Shrew. Glide, I know I see you here in the chat, so I'm going to be queuing up your story briefly. And by the way, if you're looking for a live story reading, make sure that you send an excerpt to thecreativeghostwriter@gmail.com. And let me check these, make sure I didn't miss anything. Excellent. So, absolutely make sure to send an excerpt if you want your story read. I got them all queued up and I want to get through as many as I'm able to. All right, perfect. And Glide. And by the way, if you're finding any value from this experience, follow and subscribe. Tap that follow button, tap the subscribe button. I'm crazy. I'm a crazy writer. I go live daily. Monday through Friday, I do the Kaufman Writes, which is a casual, chill writers community where we come and talk about writing stuff, workshops, do writing sprints, and all that jazz. Perfect if you struggle with writing and you need motivation or accountability. Saturday is our story and critique show. And then Sunday is usually our Creative Right Now podcast, where I bring on published authors and industry professionals and we chat about writing to help you become a better writer. We'll be returning with the podcast next week, but make sure if you're subscribed and following, you'll be alerted when I go live. All right, okay. And Glide. All right, let me throw this down here. All right, and I'm going to adjust my screen. And then we got your story, Glide. And by the way, Glide, I know you're saying you were, I think I saw a message that you were nervous. Totally no pressure, Glide. 100% Glide, like absolutely no pressure. As writers, I want you guys to keep something in mind. We are all working on our writing journey. We're at different points of our writing journey. Some of us have published stuff, some of us haven't. And as such, there's no compare and contrast, right? When we start comparing ourselves to others, then we start thinking of like, oh, well, they do that better, they do that worse, especially when we have favorite authors, when in reality, mentally we're comparing ourselves to a snapshot of where that person is at that point in their life, but we're not taking into account all of the different stuff that has gone through and that has changed throughout the throughout their writing process. All right, and let me just adjust this here. Perfect. All right, and I'm adjusting this on my end. Okay. So let me throw up my screen and glide. Excellent. And I got the timer set here. Perfect. I want to say I absolutely love your guys' banner. You guys all crack me up so much. I appreciate you guys. You guys keep me entertained. Okay. All right. So glad I am all set. Chasing the Shrew by Fang. Amelia Stein ran across the lawn, flush with excitement. Her loose, dusty brown hair looked like strands of amber waving in the glaring sun. Dustin is coming home. Her husband of 2 years was going to be home for their anniversary. She couldn't contain her squeal of delight as she gingerly bounced up the steps to the small villa. They were unable to spend their first anniversary together, so this time she was eager to make up for it. They met almost 3 years ago at a dinner party and clicked immediately. He appreciated her witty humor, and she fell for his damn good looks, which resulted in a steamy one night stand. The morning after, they parted ways amicably, leaving nothing behind. That was until she found out she was pregnant. She figured he had the right to know, so she did her due diligence to find a trace of him. She was a pretty good sleuth and discovered that he was the Dustin Roger of Roger Inc., the enigmatic billionaire, a woman's dream man, which she attested he is truly so, at least in bed. And all the other superfluous titles befitting a stud. She originally just wanted to let him know of the existence of her child, but somehow she got swept up in the whirlwind that is Roger's family. They insisted that the child could not be illegitimate, and a month later, she was Miss Rogers. Dustin was a reticent man, and they got along like a couple on paper. Apart from the bed breaking sex, they were rarely seen together. Amelia dismissed the red flag as that's just how rich people are. After the marriage, she was forced to give up her job as it was unbefitting of a madame of the Vajgrt family to be a wage slave, as she humbly submitted to the family's plethora of demands. She was, of course, just a self made orphan and had little say in anything. Life was idle, lonely, and quiet until the day she had a miscarriage. Amelia was having tea for the first time with her sister in law, the young Miss Tana Roger, when all of a sudden she fell atop the table, clutching her stomach in pain. Blood gushed from below her in torrents, and she passed out. The next waking moment, she was in the hospital with a nurse hovering over her, letting her know she had a miscarriage. Amelia was devastated and cried pitifully into the nurse's arms. She had to stay overnight for further observation, but the entire time, she was alone. No one from Roger's family came to visit her, as her husband was away on business. Amelia didn't think much of it. She was used to the cold treatment of the Roger family, so she didn't care to see them anyway. Her husband, on the other hand, she believed he was too busy with work, so the family didn't want to break the bad news to him over the phone. The next day, when she was discharged from the hospital, she went back to the Roger estate to find her things being moved out. She rushed up to inquire why her things were out of the house and was ignored until the head maid arrived on the scene and explained that Dustin had arranged for her to move to his private villa to recover. Amelia thought that this was just in consideration for her. She had never truly gotten along with his parents or sister, so living at the villa was a godsend. It was a neat little place, tucked away in groves of fruit trees. She spent her days running around the grounds and laughing with the staff. She was never asked to go back to the main residence, which she was okay with. Dustin would come every once in a while and they would lack the same amazing sex. And he would leave the next morning. He never contacted her or brought her out of the villa for any holidays. He just came and left like the wind. Amelia didn't want to confront him about it when he did come over, afraid that doing so would make him angry. But today was their second anniversary, and he called in, letting the staff know he was coming. He never did that. It was a clear indication that something was different, and Amelia could feel that somehow. He knew her little secret. She was finally pregnant again. When she found out early on, she hesitated to say anything, afraid that another miscarriage would destroy their marriage. So she waited 12 weeks. Now, chances for a miscarriage were low, and she could finally share the good news with her husband. She rubbed her stomach with a soft smile on her face. Baby, today is mommy's anniversary. Can you yield the limelight to me first? And then I'll introduce you to your father. Little did she know her long-awaited anniversary celebration would end with divorce. Wow. Oh my God, I feel like I was just like getting into the story and then that ended. That was a really good cliffhanger. That was actually a really, really nice cliffhanger. Wow, that was really cool. So I feel like we had a very straightforward story about Amelia and her joining this family and then her childbirth. And it sounds like she had gone through a miscarriage, and this time, like this childbirth was going to be different. This was not going to end up in a miscarriage, and that was super cool. I think when I look at the things that worked well for this piece, I would say, let's see, I would agree with the structure. It was definitely well structured. There's not very much dialogue in it, but the dialogue you did use actually worked very, very well. I did actually like the dialogue in it. That was really, really well done. I thought that added to the character. Let's see. The I feel like I have a good indication on Amelia's character. I think right now the opportunities is the plot and the world building. So I'll get into those in just a second. Just have a couple of just things that come to mind. But first off, chat community, what did you think of the story? Drop it in the comments below. Let me know what's the thing that you liked about it. Let's see what we got in here. Hey, what's up, Vaughn? Welcome to the stream, my friend. I realized I forgot to welcome most people to the stream. I welcome you all. Thanks for dropping by, everyone. Clearly, I'm so into the readings today. Let's see. Yeah, it's interesting because we're dealing with a very it's like a very intense, extreme moment in this character. And I'm actually glad that you mentioned that, Vaughn. You said the last story reminded you of your fire chief and ex-police from SoCal. 100%. It's cool that it has that resonant moment because it's a lot of women, a lot of couples, they've dealt with miscarriages, right? And this is something that is very easy for other people to relate with. On top of that, she's joining a brand new entire family, which is a huge thing. So let's see. I want to hop into the things. So I think, Glide, I would say my biggest opportunity for this is a little bit on the plot. So I would challenge, what is the plot of the story? And I think it sounds like the plot is then, and this is what I'm not sure about yet. And it could just be because this is an excerpt, but right now I'm not sure if the plot is Amelia and Dustin's relationships, or there's a couple of things. It could either be about Amelia and Dustin's relationship. It could be about Amelia and her experience of joining this new family, or it could be about this the childbirth process. Right now, I'm just not clear on what the plot is. It's really interesting. And what was really fascinating about it was that I was hooked by the time I got to the end of the excerpt. but I didn't get hooked until later on because I didn't know that those like that the interesting stuff with the miscarriage, I think I want that touched on a little earlier. Even if we hop around a little bit, I think it would be really powerful to touch on maybe the miscarriage, or maybe even starting off with like, how interesting would it be if we started Amelia off with this moment with the baby, and maybe building out a little bit of an intro scene with her talking to her baby, right? Because this dialogue, this is cute. Baby, today is mommy's anniversary. Can you yield the limelight to me first, and then I'll introduce you to your father? I would challenge on whether or not they need a name. Yeah, let's see. Oh, you said, yeah, you really rush the plot because it's the first chapter to get a hook. Yeah, I totally understand that. And I actually completely agree with hooks. We want to make hooks brief and engaging. Right now, this tells a full like introductory story, but the challenge is when we don't start a story off with action, then when like the last story, for instance, was an action scene, so then you use the action to hook the person. But when we start off with story that's more of a drama piece, then we need to hook the reader with the main character, with something about the main character immediately. And of course, that doesn't happen in every story, but my mindset and my thinking is that if out of the millions of people out there who could potentially read your story, if they pick it up, you need to hook them in like the first like 2 to 4 pages. People have short attention spans in this day and age. And we need to remember that because people have short attention spans, we need to make it as easy for them to get hooked as possible. So, as a new writer, or not as a new writer, but as a writer, I always like to ask myself, in the first couple of pages, what is the one thing that I want my reader to hook with? What's the one thing that I want them to make an emotional connection with? And is that moment clear? Sometimes in scripts, this can be called like a save the cat moment, which I love. I love. A save the cat moment is basically you're doing something to a character that makes us immediately feel for them. Great example. You have a character who is a gambler, who's an addict, and who's shitty to people. But then in the first scene, he gets mugged and a gun pointed in his face in the first scene, and all of his stuff is stolen. Even though he's an asshole, we feel for him because the thing happened. Save the cat. So I always recommend having a save the cat or a moment early on in your story as a hook to get them interested, because we can't assume that people are going to want to read onto further into a story unless there's some sort of emotional connection. So as it pertains to this story, which that's totally fine. And I think as it pertains, because this sounds like, I think you said this was a prologue. Let's see. Yeah, I rushed the plot because it's the first chapter. Yeah, I see rushed the plot because it's the first chapter to get a hook. I think what I would recommend adjusting with this glide is I would move up one of her, or I would foreshadow the plot sooner. I would foreshadow the plot within the first, like, maybe by page 3, even if it's like a single sentence or it's 2 sentences, because right now what's happening, Dustin is coming home. We're showing excitement. And so basically you're starting off with this moment of she's excited about her husband is coming home. And then you go into the backstory of how they met. And it's interesting. It comes across like a biography, but there's nothing that stands out about it. So I would say I would actually just adjust this opening scene. And I think this would be the opportunity. And you could actually do this really easily. I would say create some type of action or dialogue in this first section. And you could either adjust it or add something to it. And I think that would help improve the chances of making your reader want to stick around. And it's not to say that they don't right now, but I think it would just improve the likelihood, which is what I like to do. Let's see. And then as we go further into it, the Dustin Roger. I love this. She was a pretty good sleuth and discovered that he was the Dustin Roger of Roger Inc., the enigmatic billionaire, a woman's dream man. I love that, right? So basically, we're listening to the story of her joining a wealthy family, which is fun. The stories work well. I almost want a little description. Like, I think something that could work here is I almost want like a description of like how does he act with her? Because he's this enigmatic billionaire. Because you touch upon the child. So you go into describing him, and then you go from okay. So you go from her at the villa, the present moment. This I'm pretty sure this is the present moment. And then you go into the past. Talk about the billionaire. We're going into backstory of Roger's family, and she was Miss Roger. Yep. Dustin. I like this. Once again, your little like character descriptions of them are really clever. I like that. Let's see. Um, so I think these are some good character descriptions for her. And then you touch upon the miscarriage and quiet until the day she had a miscarriage. So I think what would be interesting is, especially because the miscarriage is such an important plot point, I think by setting the tone with her and a child, and then touching on the miscarriage would actually create that foreshadowing. That would actually work very well. And then this goes in the backstory of the miscarriage itself, which is good. We get to learn. And I think glide from this is just a pure reader's perspective. And also keep in mind that I'm not your intended audience. But keeping that in mind, I was, as a reader, I was pulled into the story here. This is when I was hooked into the story during this miscarriage, that this scene, because this is an intense action that I wasn't expecting. So, and this is just a note for you where I got hooked into it. Mm, this is just so interesting. And I think what I love, Glide, about the story is you do a good job of these you're creating these realistic moments for a work of fiction, essentially a little nonfiction. So you're creating these moments where it's it feels like it's in its own world, but it's things that people can relate with. And I think that's what works really well. And it's like we get to learn more about the husband than by his lack of actions than anything else. And I really like that. This is a perfect example of showing and not telling. So really great work, Glide, because that's hard to pull off. I would say after this moment, when she gets back from the hospital, I would for this section, I would just edit this down a little bit. It's just a little wordy. When she found out she is saying that. So until you get back to the miscarriage again, I would just edit this down. I would just cut it down a little bit. I think that's more of a line edit than anything. Let's see. She hesitated to say anything, afraid that another miscarriage would destroy their marriage. So she waited 12 weeks. And then we get to the miscarriage. And then we're back at the miscarriage plot, which I love. Perfect. And then we're back here. So yeah, so I think once again, the biggest opportunity for this glide is really just highlighting the plot. It's really highlighting and making the plot a little clearer because I have a sense of her in character, right? I have enough of a sense of her. I have enough of a sense of this like not this wealthy family, which is great, but I need more plot. And when I say more plot, it doesn't mean like, oh, you need to say what the plot is. I need more foreshadowing or touching upon it. because the plot is another thing that gets us hooked. And because this story is focused around or this section is focused around the miscarriage, that helps hook me into the plot sooner. So, yeah, that's all that I got for you, though. Really, really great work, man. Really, really great work, Glide. That was really awesome. Let's see. That is all that I got for you. Glide, thank you so much for submitting that story. That was a really cool piece. Awesome. And you did really nice of you to do this. Awesome. And Glide, thank you. I'm glad that that the comments that they're helping you and the edits work. If you have any questions or if there's anything that like doesn't make sense, feel free to message me on Facebook or through email if there's any specific questions that you have. Yes, this is why I submitted. I really wanted to be torn apart so I can improve. That is a great mindset to have. When we put our work out there, we always want to remember if people are taking time to comment and provide feedback, they're giving up time. Time is an invaluable resource. We don't get back time. So if people are taking time, an invaluable resource to give you feedback, take that feedback into consideration. But remember, you're the master of your own story. You don't have to take everybody's feedback. You pick and choose what works for your story based on your goals. So absolutely, Glide. That's absolutely awesome. Let's see. Bethany, everyone is scared of rejections, but that's how it is. Rejection is the first step towards your success. Yeah, and we have a couple. It looks like we're touching upon rejections a little bit. Is needed. Type of is needed. I'm scared of rejection. So we have a couple who are talking about rejection. A couple of you in the chat, which is great. Let me touch upon rejection real fast. So a lot of the times when with storytelling, and I see this happen with so many beginning writers, I'm not saying that you guys are, but this is just what I see from writers in general, is we put out something, we put out a piece of work and we put our heart into it because it's based off our experience, our beliefs and all that. And then we put it out into the world. We have certain expectations, whether or not we say it. Maybe it's subconscious. We have expectations and how we want it to be perceived. So when people don't respond to it in a way that matches certain expectations, that makes us feel a way about it. Sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's positive. My suggestion is when you put your story out into the world, have zero expectations for it. Actually, and this is what I do, have like the expectations that it's like everybody's going to say really bad things about it. And then you're going to everything's going to be great from there. But no, it's the fear of rejection is because we're afraid of our work being judged at heart. So I would say the fact that you're able to put it out there is great. And like Bethany, I think something really important to highlight is a lot of published authors have put their stories out like so many times and it gets rejected. Rejection is part of the game. Learn to love rejection, right? Rejection, same with failure. Failure is the best teacher. My mindset is I will fail my way to success. Hooray, that is amazing. That definitely deserves an applause. Absolutely great. And you have to keep in mind that our education system, most of us have gone through the education system, it teaches us that when we get bad grades, when we fail, we are horrible or we do worse. But we have to keep in mind that think of like great athletes, think about like professionals, think about business owners, especially artists a lot of the time. You don't succeed unless you failed 10 times, 20 times, 100 times. Enjoy the process, right? Learn that every time you fail is just an opportunity to get better. Absolutely. And then you just put yourself out to writing communities. Something that helps with fear of rejection as well is if you put it out to somebody to read, make sure that you clarify what your expectations are if you give your editor or your readers or whoever clear expectations on being like, hey, you know what? I don't like rejection, but I know I need to get better. Could you give this type of advice? Then you're not going to have bad expectations. And that's something that can help as well. Awesome. I'm glad that these are really helping you. So, with that being said, I hope that helps a little bit. I touch on writing stuff all the time, and I know what it feels like to have that initial fear of having your stuff read. You're like, oh, is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? I get such a rush out of the experience. Okay. So, next up, I have Veronique Racine. I hope I'm saying your last name right, Veronique. So, Veronique, I have your excerpt on deck, Pioneer Excerpt by Veronique. Veronique, if you're here in the chat, just say I. Let me know that you're here as I queue up your story. Vaughn, I'm glad that you brought up my YouTube show. Yeah, I've been YouTubing for the past decade, but early on, I didn't do as much YouTubing. My early days was a lot of inspirational self-help videos. Atomic, that is some absolutely incredible advice. Give yourself permission to write badly. That also deserves an applause. That's some great advice. All right. So we got that. Looks like we got my ideal author. Catania had a really good one. My ideal author here in India has been rejected by all the big publication houses in India, more or less 19 rejections. And then he self-published his first book. And right now he is a celebrated author. There you go. I mean, if you look at, if you're ever feeling down about yourself, just go Google famous authors who were rejected a lot. And I'm sure you'll hear the big ones. Ones that come to mind, Game of Thrones is a favorite one of mine. George R. R. Martin was a screenwriter in the television industry for a long time, quit, went and did his own thing, and then Game of Thrones became a best-selling novel like 10 years later. J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter. Her book was rejected. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and not Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, was rejected so many times until it was picked up. Let's see, Marcella. Let's see. Good question. Since mine is a script and there isn't much descriptions, is it possible to submit a page or two of illustrations to give an idea of what all the characters look like? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I do scripts as well. We actually do get, I want to say I get, on average, I probably get about 60% novels, 60% novel excerpts, 20% short stories, and then 15% scripts and 5% poetry. So definitely we haven't had somebody submit an animation like that before, but I think that'd be cool. We can absolutely throw it on the screen while I'm doing the reading if you want to provide some additional context, both for myself and for the audience. I actually think that's a really great, absolutely great idea, Marcella. Absolutely. Just make sure, Marcella, to include that any illustrations in the email. And let me make sure I throw up my email. Where did it go? So it's thecreativeghostwriter@gmail.com. Let's see, I'll throw it up as a bigger one. So it's thecreativewriter@gmail.com or thecreativeghostwriter@gmail.com. Throw it over there and yeah, make sure you send it over. Perfect. Let's see. And awesome. All right, Veronique. I'm glad I said it. Glad I said it right. I wasn't sure if I could get your last Racine. I was like, hopefully. After having worked customer service for like 10 years, I have to get names right. Perfect. Welcome to YouTube. Like I said, if you're here from any of the 5 platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, LinkedIn, X, welcome. YouTube tends to be the smoothest streaming experience, but you can come here from any of the platforms. So glad to have you here, Veronique. All right, perfect. And by the way, before I hop into this next section, I want to highlight my brand new, the Easy Edit tool. So I just developed a brand new tool for writers to help you when editing your story. Now, I always recommend that at some point, like if we're going to get our stuff published, you should hire a professional editor eventually, right? But if you're working on a budget, which most of us are, and we need to improve the efficiency of our process, this tool is going to help you become a faster editor when you're working on early drafts of your story. I just launched it. It's a brand new tool and it's absolutely free, costs $0. All I'm doing is I'm using it to launch my newsletter. It's called the Easy Edit tool. There's the cover. Here's the table of contents. Just kind of shows some of the things that I touch on. And then this is just an example of I give a couple of practical solutions. And then I usually try to follow up with examples of how I would go about using these solutions in a real story context. So it gives solutions and examples for each of those, for each of these areas. It's super helpful and it's absolutely free. If you want a copy of the tool, just shoot me an email, thecreativeghostwriter@gmail.com. Send me the email and I'll add you to the list and it will send you the Easy Edit tool. Make sure you get on it because this is super cool. I also want feedback on how it helps. I want to make sure that the stuff I put out is actually beneficial to you. So, excellent. All right, beautiful. So with that out of the way, Veronique, let's pull up your story. All right, and I'm going to set you here. Awesome. And I got, oh, nope, wrong one. Let's add that back. Beautiful. So we are all set here. I got you back up. And give me a second. Let me just double check emails. Got to make sure I'm not missing another one. Excellent. Thank you all for sending over your excerpts. I always add them to the queue. All right. Perfect. Awesome. I think I like that a little better. Okay. I am all ready. Whew. All right. Hold on. I got sound in the background. Garage door opening. Technical difficulties. On a memento. Okay. Perfect. Excerpt of Pioneer by Veronique Racine. It seemed impossible that they would survive this crash landing. Hoping seemed ridiculous. There was no time for hope. Then again, hope had died and left this side of the galaxy a long time ago. Yet this voyage had felt like hope, his last hope for a life of some kind. Another deception? Standing in that crowded street, feeling dizzy and nauseous, when he had been engulfed by the promotional hologram, he had felt this was his destiny, his path. Leading to this pointless death? Why wasn't he even surprised? The world became Stygian blackness as his brain was incapable of handling the stress of the uncontrolled descent into the atmosphere of ZT-714. He hadn't thought it would hit him so hard. To see Racine go like that, they had been comrade in arms. Yes, friends, yes. But Anders had never felt such a strong bond with his fellow officers. He had done his duty. He had tried not to get too attached. All his life, he had tried not to get too attached to anything for fear to see it taken from him. But after battling with Affliction 8 for 6 months and actually coming out of it to be purged and terminated because the medical bill outweighed his caste privileges. The sheer uselessness of it weighed on Anders so much he felt stifled in the traffic of the mid-afternoon. No one was giving him any special attention. He was dressed inconspicuously, black shirt, black trousers, not a hint of the concentric gold band that was now his hard-acquired right. The gold marker that would have made everyone swerve and give him room on the sidewalk. But he didn't want to draw unhealthy attention to himself. He readjusted his blue light glasses, iridescent in the harsh sunlight, absolutely necessary to protect from 8G radiation, ultraviolets, and other visual containments that could turn one blind in just a few unprotected hours, and tried to walk briskly to get to the trail station in time for the 4 o'clock trail back home. He wished he was home already, away from all the bustle and the noise. Those in the network barely realized the amount of noise around them. Caught in their personal hollow bubble, they were blissfully unaware of almost everything that happened in the real world, until it hit them full force. Rysek's last wish imposed itself on his mind, and he felt a little dizzy, having to lean against the nearest wall to regain his composure. "Don't let them turn you into me," he said before his eyes had glazed over for good. Worst thing was, if he was completely honest with himself, which he normally was, unfortunately for him, Anders felt envious of his old friend. Rysek's fight was over. Nothing left to prove. No decision to be made. No choice. Life seemed much scarier than death at that moment. That was when the promotional hologram deployed, engulfing him in the simulated reality. First reaction was panic, to be thrust into a completely realistic space-like environment. Then he removed his glasses to be able to see firsthand what was being shown, and he could not take his eyes away. Zenith 147 awaits you. Always dream to see untamed land, unseen scapes, to discover, to set foot where no sentient being has gone before. This is your chance, all castes accepted, no discrimination in the new realm. The chance to become everything you ever wanted to be. Sign up to be a pioneer and participate in the greatest endeavor of humankind. Conquer your fear and conquer the new world. Zenith 147 awaits. The images were simply breathtaking. The space, the landscapes, things he could not even name, as he had no idea what they were or supposed to be. But the weight he had been feeling seemed to magically vanish. His heart was beating so fast in his chest, but not from fear. He wasn't sure he had ever felt this emotion. He didn't know what to call it, but as soon as the holo was over, he spotted the recruitment center and dashed inside, barely taking the time to readjust his blue light glasses. The recruitment officer was sprawled on his chair, looking bored, trapped in the realm of the network. It was nice and cool and quiet in the center. Barely a hallway, really. But it was much better than on the streets outside. He barely reacted until Anders cleared his throat. That brought him back to real reality. "Yeah, what?" "You're hollow," Anders said, having trouble finding the proper words. "Oh, yeah, sorry, hombre. I am bound by law to have it active at least 6 hours a day. If it interrupted your network bind, it will come back in a few secs. No worries." "How do I sign up?" Anders put to him. "How do you what?" The recruitment officer now looked puzzled, out of bounds. "The holo said, all castes accepted. How do I sign up?" You kidding me here? You want to volunteer?" The recruitment officer started chuckling in disbelief. "Yes, exactly. How do I apply? Where? Here?" "Look, hombre, we are required by law to do this. No one volunteers. All that happens is those on termination notice get tested to see their mettle. And those who pass the tests are sent. ZTH-147 is a semi-toxic dump. No one in their right mind would volunteer to go there. I'm not in my right mind. I want to volunteer. Where do I do it? Anders said with the beginning of annoyance. Look, you're what? Having a bad day, right, Ombre? It'll pass. Go deep in the network, let loose, it will pass. This bad decision won't. You go there, you die. That's what they don't tell you in the hollow brochure. For the last time, where do I volunteer? Anders insisted, fisting one of his hands, wishing punching the ineffective man would actually help him get on board faster. You're what? Past 7? It's not so bad, okay? You will see more clearly tomorrow. Think it through, Ombre. Anders pulled the collar of his shirt up, which activated the gold band. I am Anders Tomas Ricea. I am tasked for, and I am demanding you let me volunteer. The look of shock on the attendant's face was almost enough to make up for all the runaround he had caused. C4? I've always dreamed of being C4, he said in an envious whisper. Just let me sign up now, Anders replied. It's your funeral, the attendant said in a sigh. You have to sign here, 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 and here, and here, and here. DNA sample here, retinal scan here, record your voice consent to volunteer after the tone, and then all that's left is the test. Test? Anders asked as he signed and put his initials on a half a dozen different documents. Yeah, Ombre. Zenith 147 has a nasty atmospheric soup. Not everyone can take it. They get filters, but only the toughest can take that. Like maybe 10% of the population. What's the test about? And what happens if I don't pass it? Anders worried. You don't pass, you can't go. You'd fall dead the second you breathe in the soup. Pulling cast won't change a thing. If you don't pass the test, you don't go. You should pray you don't pass, Ombre. Trust me, you do not want to be set up there. It's hell, and not the good kind either. The first thing Anders became aware of was his lungs on fire. He could feel every last bronchiole, every alveoli, hundreds of millions in every lung, all of them dying from the soup, as was called the atmospheric mix of Zenith 147. He wasn't just short-breathed. He was struggling for a tiny amount of air that would not come. There was 65% nitrogen and 28% oxygen on Zenith 147, but mixed with trace amounts of yet unknown and unnamed gases. Those gases reacted with the exchange process in the alveoli and made an allergic reaction. Their lungs would start producing mucus to protect their fragile membranes, and the process would kill them. The strongest of them could last 2 weeks, maybe, without filters, but the filters can only be installed at the main facility in Zenith, the planet's capital and sole habitable city. Anders managed to sit up, wishing the pain would abate a little so he could think. His body was covered in bruises that added to the confusion and pain he was feeling. But air! He needed that air. Something was burning beside him, and he crawled away, coughing and regretting it as pain exploded in his chest and threatened to make him pass out. The ship had crashed. He saw some light in the distance, blood, body parts, shredded metal, and burnt plastics, but light. The hull was breached, which was why the soup was in. The hull had been torn like a can, and drawing on energy he wasn't sure he really had. He dragged himself forward to see. If he died in the next moment, he wanted to see Zenith 147 with his own eyes. The distance seemed insurmountable to cross. That light was so far away, and he had no breath to speak of, nothing to give out anymore. Their ship had crashed. He didn't know where they were, if anyone was left alive. He didn't know if anyone would come to their rescue, and even these thoughts had trouble forming in the air-deprived mind. One glimpse would be enough. Just one glimpse of freedom. Coughing and crying for his eyes were also reacting to the change of atmosphere. He managed to lift himself over the ragged edges of the hull, where it had been shattered and torn by the crash, and tumbled down without kindness, as he was much higher than could have expected. But for one eternal second, before the gravity of ZTH-147 took over, 1/3 times that of Earth, meaning he weighed a third more now, he took it all in. Images burn like fire into his brain. The valleys and mountains, the vegetation, green, grayish, and purplish, with hues of iridescent red. Everything screaming freedom, space, and what he yearned for most of all, peace. But everything smelled like death. Wow. Really nice story, by the way, Veronique. That was a really interesting story. I feel like I got pulled into this like whole like science fiction world, which was actually super cool. I had a lot of fun digging into that world. I would actually say, hands down, the things that absolutely worked, the things that were brilliant about this world building was very, very on point. I have a very clear sense of what this world is. I love the world building. The dialogue, we could use some adjustments for the dialogue. I'll get into that in a second. I like the plot. I think the plot is super cool. I think the only thing that's holding the plot back is some more technical line edits. So right now, what works well is the plot and the world building. I like your character. I get a sense of him, and I think it's yeah. So I actually think the thing that's the opportunities for this piece are probably structure, if anything, or maybe a little grammar. So right now, the plot and the world building were my absolute favorite. I felt like I was fully engaged in this world, and I was at the point as a reader where I wanted to know. I wanted to know more about the world. I wanted to know more about the caste system. I wanted to know more about like the hierarchies. I thought the exchange between the main character and the guard was actually kind of funny. It had some very funny moments to it. It was definitely fun. So I would say that was definitely the strengths and the things that worked out well. Okay, so let's hop into some of the opportunities for it. All right. And by the way, chat, it's looking like you're getting a lot of appreciation in the chat as well. Chat, was there any specific things that like stood out to you from the overall story that you liked, or anything you thought could be improved upon? Awesome. Just drop a comment if there's anything that comes to mind. All right. So I would say from the beginning, let's see. Then again, this is your hook is very well done. Great hook, great description. There was no time for hope. Then again, hope had died and left this side of the galaxy a long time ago. Great use of description to set up the world. You're using the world as a hook for the story, which does a good job. Very well done. Let's see, standing in that crowded street. So Veronique, I think the biggest opportunity for this story is your transitions. And I think there was a couple of times where when you go from scene to scene, I got a little lost when I was reorienting myself. And maybe partially I'm like, okay, maybe part of it is the live experience. But I think also as a reading experience, when you change scenes, there's a couple of times where it feels like it's like a disrupt change. And I'll give you the examples. So you do this first hook about the world, which is good. The world became Stygian black. Why wasn't he even surprised? So this would be my recommendation. I would use if you're doing some type of jump. So this one right here, who is talking about this? So when we do this first initial description, yet this voyage had felt like hope, his last. Okay, so it's clearly all from his point of view, which is fine. It seemed that they would survive this crash landing. Hoping seemed ridiculous. There was no time for hope. Then again, okay, so this is the moment that's happening during the crash landing at the back end. Now I'm just piecing that together because I got so engaged in the story itself. Okay, so this is what's confusing about this right now. So this opening is super cool. I love this opening. This voyage felt like hope. So this opening is cool. You immediately hop from this moment into the crowded street moment, and it's a little jarring. I thought that I was just in a crash, so now am I on a crash in a crowded street? And I think like now that I've read the full piece, it makes sense to me. But from a reader's perspective, it makes it you could potentially lose the reader easily if they get confused because you're going from one moment, oh, I'm in a crash, so I'm in a crash on a crowded street. When in reality, what's happening is you're just changing from the present moment, which is actually the crash, back to doing some background. So I think what I would do I think what I would do for this is you could go about it a couple of different ways. You could either use some type of line break. I actually almost think, Veronique, let's see. So you said this was an excerpt, which means I don't know if this is the beginning of the story. It might not be, which is fine. If this is the beginning of the story, I would almost make this a prologue. I would make this a prologue and expand it just a little bit. But if this is in the middle of the story, then ignore that recommendation. So I think that, so like Veronique, and I saw the same thing later on in the story. Whenever you change from scene to scene, you just have to make it clearer, right? Page breaks or italics or lines. We see so many different things in stories. You can do whatever you want. But this is the easy way. If you want to use the storytelling itself to transition, then you have to do a paragraph block that is extremely clear. What was the main character's name again? To see where I go, like the Anders. Anders, as the ship was crashing, Anders thought back to the beginning. Right? So you can do something like that where you can use description itself. This is one way where you can keep the narrative moving without using a page break, but you got to do something that's clear. So that way you just don't lose your readers. And I'm going to say this is the same exact recommendation that I will have when you jump from the end of this office scene back to the crash. Same exact thing, because it's just a little jarring. Okay. Let's see. Standing in the crowded street. This was all good. I like the description for the world. Your description is very, very fun. Absolutely great descriptions. And it's like, once again, oh, I love your world building. And this is a great call out for any of you who are sci-fi fans or sci-fi writers. The reason that your world is interesting and unique is because you use word choice that is specific to this world. I'm like, Affliction 8? I want to know more about Affliction 8. Caste privileges. The average person probably has an idea of what a caste system is, maybe. I'm like, oh, what's a caste privilege in this world? You do that continuously throughout the story. ZT714, interesting. That's unique to the world. Really great job. That's why your world building works. And you do a very good job of setting up Anders' character through this affliction. The sheer uselessness of it weighed on Anders. I think this early part, so before he gets to that conversation, distract. Yeah, no, this is good. But I think before he gets to the conversation, I think the biggest thing is it just needs a little bit of editing. There's some parts which are wordy, which is a little too much for me to go into detail here on a stream. But I would say it just needs to be edited down a little bit just on wordiness. And whether that's something that you do or you hire an editor. Let's see, don't let them, he said before it's escalate over. And then in this part, I'm not sure who is he talking to, because you have the main character, you have Anders. Is he walking with a friend to see Racine? He hadn't thought it would hit him so hard to see Racine go like that. They had been comrades in arms yesterday. Okay, yeah, so it's Anders and Racine. They're walking side by side. So I think we just need to be better grounded in what is this moment, at least for their walking scene. And anything that's super easy, just be like Anders and Racine are Anders and Racine's last wish. Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. That was Racine's last wish. Gotcha. Okay. That's why it was confusing. Gotcha. Okay. So this is a rule. This is a dialogue rule. No quotation marks if it's not a character speaking. There we go. That's the easiest fix. No quotation marks unless only quotation marks if a character speaking. If it's a thought or you want to highlight something, you could go a couple different ways. We could italicize it. We could bold it. We could italicize unbold it. And then not that. We would go like this would be the correct way. I think the standard is just italicizing. I think that's the standard, but do that because I think it's pretty standard that quotation marks, it would just get people confused. So quotation marks are only if a character's speaking. I liked your use of parentheses. Great work. We don't always see parentheses too often in storytelling, but I think it worked. There's only one moment where the parentheses do not work, and it's at the end here, because this time the parentheses pulls us out of the action. So I would cut the parentheses out of moments where we're having a high action because we want to keep the pacing. We want to keep the pacing consistent. And then my last major piece of advice, which is to this office scene. So first off, I love the setup for it. The voice was great. I was like, I had fun with that voice. I think this was great. I think as once again, I was just a little confused on who was talking, but then I'm like, okay, so it's this like hologram that he's watching. He could not take his eyes away. I think I would just clarify it. And he could not take his eyes away as the hologram began speaking. And that's like such an easy fix. Just make that a little clearer. I think this entire dialogue scene though, between him and the officer is fun. It's really fun. The dialogue works. And I think the dialogue itself, I have two very distinct characters and I have a clear picture of the scene. The biggest opportunity for this right now is just some use of speech tags. And then making sure that you're using it. You don't need that. It's fine. I think there was a couple times where the speech tags might have been lost. Make sure, so like you use the speech tags in the beginning. I would just intersperse maybe a couple later on. I also want a little more action. So the second half of the dialogue, the second half of the conversation, their speech needs to just be edited down a little bit just because it's a little wordy. Look, you're what? Having a bad day, right? I'll pass. Go deep in the network, let loose. Having a bad day, right? It'll pass. Let loose. I would end that. You go there, you die. Look. Yeah, and I would cut it down like that. And I think each of the dialogue, it just needs line editing. That's really the biggest thing. It just the story's at the point where the world itself is pretty well developed, and there's a lot of these things that you can do yourself. But I think it's probably almost time for a full line edit of the story and just cutting out on wordiness. It'll make it clearer. I'd also recommend with some of the dialogue on the second half of their conversation, just adding some actions. Like, what are the characters doing specifically? I think that was the miss. Like Anders like waving his fists in the air and like about to like punch the guy in the face. Is the officer like standing up being like, you know what? It's all good. You don't want to go there. It's one of them holding up a gun. Like so many things could be happening. So just add a little bit of action, but I have a clear sense of what's going on. I think it would just add to the scene. Perfect. And I think that's all the comments. I already touched on that transition for the second half. Once you go back to that scene, the next scene, that's cool. It's cool. It just needs a better transition back to that scene. But that's fun. And then once again, Veronique, or I didn't say this earlier, but the ending, yes, the ending was great. Great cliffhanger. I absolutely loved it. Makes me want to read more. So awesome. Really great work, Veronique. That's all that I got for you. Awesome. So that was a really good sci-fi story. I really enjoyed that. And I know that was just an excerpt. So I hope you got value out of that. Definitely let me know. Feel free to shoot me a message on Facebook or email if there's anything that you had questions about. But I had a lot of fun reading that story. That was like really cool. Really, really cool. Good luck with the continued editing process. This is so fun. Yes. Woo. I know, right? I try to have as much fun with these stories as possible. Thanks for offering up your story. And definitely feel free if you want to send in other excerpts in the future. Awesome. I'm glad that I was able to help out, Veronique. Thank you. Let's see. Let me just check in some of the chats. Yeah, and it looks like you had some really good comments on here. By the way, Steph, I didn't get to say welcome to the stream. Once I start getting into the reading, I miss it. Let's see. Oh, sorry, I couldn't get. Yeah, and it looks like Veronique, you're on YouTube, so you're seeing all the comments. So Veronique, just make sure that you see some of the comments. Like I saw both Kane and Glide both had some really good comments on there as well, for just some things to be aware of. And it looks like they're just editing things and they're highlighting things that I had touched upon. So really, really great work. Awesome. So let's pull up where are we next? We got Zach Warden. Zach, if you're here in the stream, just drop a comment. Let me know that you're here. I got you on deck. The torch was broken by Zach Warden. Just drop a comment if you're here in the stream, Zach. All right. And let's see. Let me just hop into my email real quick. I always have to check because I get so many different emails from so many different places. Okay. So perfect. We are good right now. Zach, would you please stand up? And by the way, even if you're not here, or even if, let's say, sometimes writers will submit stories and they miss it, it's totally all good. It doesn't require you to be live for me to do the story, because these streams, a lot of people end up watching this on the replay. A lot of the audience will end up watching this after it's uploaded. But if you're here during the live experience, it allows you to be able to ask questions and interact if you want while I'm doing the reading. Beautiful. All right, so let me queue up Zach's story. And while I'm queuing up Zach's story, by the way, if you're enjoying the show, tap that like button. Smash that like button, punch the like button, hit the like button. You see that like button, the little thumbs up, triple thumbs up. Give it a thumbs up. Let me know that you're enjoying the stream, that you're getting value out of this, and that you're enjoying the experience. Help us show the algorithm this is a cool stream, because the more the algorithm gets responses from us, the more it pushes it out to other writers. The more writers we get, the more feedback we all get from our writing. So it's a win-win for all of us. So if you're enjoying the stream, tap that like button, please, and thank you. Tip my hat. All right. So Zach, I got your story all queued up. The torch was broken. Perfect. And I guess this would probably be a good time. If you want your story read, I'll throw this up again. Make sure to send an email to thecreativeghostwriter@gmail.com. If you want your story read, thecreativeghostwriter@gmail.com. All right. I am all set here. Perfect. I got the timer reset. We got 20 minutes on the clock. Glide, I actually, as a side note, I picked up the Slim Shady. Will the real Slim Shady please stand up? That like brings me back. My brother was like such a fan of Eminem when we were really young. It like brings me back to my the Slim Shady days. I absolutely love that. Okay, so I think I am all set here. All right, perfect. We're gonna do that. I like that. Okay. The torch was broken by Zach Warden. Lauren, terrified, fumbled around in the darkness, cursing her clumsiness for dropping the precious torch as she had fallen. In rising panic, she blindly searched the ground before her, frantically sweeping with outstretched hands before locating and grasping the torch. Triumphantly. Her relief, however, was to be short lived, as after repeated flicking of the power button, it was clear the torch was now broken. It was at this point that Lauren steadied herself and took stock of her situation. It was not looking good. Lost in the unforgiving darkness, hours from the surface, and alone with whatever had taken the others. Lauren, Jess, and Jake had started their descent into the Mexican Yucatan cave system the previous morning. All three of them were supercharged with excitement at the Mexican Department of Antiquities, allowing a license for the 3-week research expedition, especially as a preliminary Renaissance trip had discovered several Mayan ceremonial artifacts, lying mere feet into the first chamber. From the moment they entered the cavernous entrance, they had felt the weight of atmosphere alongside the geological beauty of the place. That and no small measure of anxiety. The Mayans had, after all, thought this place to be the portal to Xibalba, or the afterlife, and had sacrificed young children to the rain god Shock to hear. The air lay thick with the enormity of this fact. Lauren reflected that they should have adhered to protocol and set up a base camp and way stations as procedure dictated. But of course, they had not. Jake had insisted that they pressed on. Just a little further, please, ladies, Jake had pleaded. One more chamber. Of course, both Lauren and Jess, being besotted with them, had not resisted. Jake's final moments sadly had not been in keeping with his handsome, boyish, playful demeanor. After several hours, the trio had happened across an uncharted side cavern, partially obscured behind a short waterfall. Jake had plunged through without hesitation, prompting the two girls to follow suit. Emerging through the other side, the girls had wiped the water from their eyes just in time to see Jake on a narrow ledge above a deep chasm, peering into the face of a mummified skeleton in the feathered garb of a Mayan high priest. Ladies, you have to get up here and see this, he had shouted down, his head torch temporarily blinding them as he turned to beckon them up. There are piles of bones up here. I think this chap must have made sacrifices from here and thrown the sacrifices into the chasm. We know they skinned and dismembered the sacrifice before committing the offering. But why is the priest's body there? How's it just standing there? Lauren had shouted up. Jake had turned his head to investigate, but as he reached to touch the priest's arm, it had turned its head and appeared to leap at Jake. The girls could only watch on in horror, as within the limits of the torchlight, they saw the embraced forms of Jake and the priest's skeleton plunge into the darkness of the chasm. Jake's scream echoing from all directions before being cut alarmingly short. The rest was a blur. Jess had run screaming back to the waterfall. By the time Lauren had gathered her wits to follow, all she could see was the light of Jess's torch bouncing off of the cavern ceiling, heading in the wrong direction. Lauren had been torn between heading back out to the entrance to radio for help or pursuing Jess. In a split-second decision, she set off after Jess. Jake was almost certainly beyond help now, whereas Jess could be helped, but that help was needed now, not in the 4 to 6 hours it would take a rescue team to reach them. Plus, of course, what the hell had they just witnessed? There may be something down here that wished them harm. Following Jess's tracks was not as hard as Lauren had feared. The floor of the caves, after all, had lain undisturbed for hundreds, if not thousands of years. There were obvious footprints in areas where the debris of the cave floor had been disturbed. But more worryingly, several items from Jess's kit and backpack lay as markers, which must have fallen or been abandoned in her panicked state. Lauren had already begun to regret her choice when, just as her head torch failed and she swapped to the hand torch from her kit, she also discovered Jess's discarded in the dirt. Its batteries too depleted. Lauren swung her torch around wildly. Jess! Jess! She had shouted, forgetting her fear of what else may have been stalking her, due to the fact she had found Jess's hand torch lying in the dirt 2 hours before. Jess was now alone in the darkness. Fighting her fear, Lauren continued to follow some more tracks, leading further still into the depths. It appeared that Jess may now be crawling on her hands and knees, but the tracks had ended abruptly at an outcropping of rock, and there on the rock face, there was blood. Lots of blood, which smeared upwards. Over the rock face looked as though Jess may have been dragged over the top. Slowly and quietly, Lauren crept to the top, fearful of what she might find. She barely breathed as she carefully stood at the top and peered down, and then reeled back in terror and fell. This had been the moment that Lauren had dropped the torch. Now she lay perfectly still in the black void, too terrified to move. She had seen Jess's bloodied body. Wedged between a crevice, causing her to reel back and fall. Now, as she lay in the darkness, she could hear ragged breathing and something moving in the darkness, near to where Jess's body had been lain. Lauren, daring not to breathe, closed her eyes and waited as all hope left her. Not 20 feet away, just to the other side of the outcrop, Jess tried to push herself even further into the sanctuary of the cleft in the rock. Blood poured from the deep wound to her head, where she had dashed it against the rock face earlier. Having hauled herself over the outcrop, she had then hidden shivering in the darkness. When she had seen the torchlight, followed by Lauren's form appearing over the top of the outcrop, Jess had almost cried out. But just as the torchlight had found her, Lauren had suddenly disappeared, as though snatched by something from the darkness behind. Now with eyes tight shut, Jess pressed herself even tighter into the cleft in the rock face as her wits and hope evaporated. Back at the waterfall, Jake blinked back into consciousness. Within the darkness, he could feel the ledge that had broken his fall beneath him and what was left of his ill-conceived practical joke on top of him. Jake had spent hours carefully upcycling an old Halloween prop into the Mayan priest's mummy, relishing the moment the girls would scream as it jumped to life. He had carefully orchestrated the scene in the area behind the waterfall during the recon trip a month or so before. However, he had not noticed then or today that the ledge his elaborate prank was fixed to was crumbling. Clearly, the sprung-loaded contraption he had devised had been too much for the unstable rock face, and it had jettisoned himself, the priest's mummy, and half the ledge into the chasm. Unable to move and spitting up blood, Jake knew he would never see daylight again. Remorsefully, he hoped the girls were okay, hoped they would find their way out. Closing his eyes, he was never to know his hopes for both Lauren and Jess were to be futile. End. Aw, that's like bittersweet. That's like a really bittersweet story. Aw. We brought back to life Jake. He didn't actually die, but he actually did die. He was like dying. Interesting. Yeah, no, this is a really cool story, actually. This kind of reminds me, Glad you said this story looks familiar for some reason. This is a really good take on like a horror story. I've seen kind of like similar types before. It was actually kind of funny. I was watching a horror movie. Was that The Descent, which gives me the same vibe. But yeah, no, I love this story as a horror piece. Horror stories are fun. I appreciate the horror and the thriller genre. I think a lot of the things that work really well for this. The world building was fun. I really like this world that they set up. The intrigue and the hook of it is that there's this maybe like evil Mayan characters or creatures in there when really it's just him pulling a prank, right? There's nothing evil in there, but we're led to believe that it is. And I think that's part of the fun of the story. Let's see. The plot is clear. Yeah, I would say the plot is clear. The plot works. I would say right now the opportunities for this piece are character development and then structure. Yeah, I would say those would be our two opportunities. I feel like I know Jake the most of the three of them, and maybe that's because I got more on him on the end. But Lauren and Jess, I feel a little interchangeable at times, and I need a little bit more character description on kind of who they are as individuals. And then that combined with some of like the scene change-ups in the middle, it lost me in where the present moment was because I wasn't sure. I was like, wait, didn't Jess fall or did Lauren fall? And for some reason, I was mixing them up, but that could have just been me. Okay, so let's go through it. All right, so this was a good like early setup. Lauren, terrified, foaming around in the darkness. Yeah, so you basically used the hook after Lauren had fell, I believe. Yeah, so you basically used this as a setup after she had fell, which is good. I like that. I feel like this pulls me into the story with the action. I think something that I would also add to this, so I would actually add a little bit more foreshadowing. I like this. This is one, it's basically one long paragraph. So I would edit it down briefly because you get the clear, you get our terror, you get the action. And I like that it touches upon the broken torch. And I would actually say I would get rid of this and I would touch upon her fear that there's some evil Mayan spirit about to come attack her. Because we're of the belief that there's a Mayan thing, and I think you could use a little bit more foreshadowing. I think you could use this as a little bit of foreshadowing for the story itself. Absolutely. You could absolutely use this as a bit of foreshadowing. Yeah, Glide, that's actually a good point. I think Zach posted this on the writers Facebook group. He did. And after he also asked me to critique it after he got feedback on it. So good call out, Glenn. Let's see, I'm not sure if torches were old time fire torches or modern handheld lamps. Depending on the intended audience, EU audience will interpret one. Exactly. That was something else I was going to touch upon. When you say torch, I think of a torch from like a fantasy game, like a torch, a wooden torch with like a flickering flame. But this torch, I get that it's like a flashlight. And this could absolutely be regional differences. Are flashlights called torches in the UK? Is that why? Oh, an electric torch, usually shortened to torch. Gotcha. Okay, because that threw me off. I'm like, wait, are they talking about like a torch that you hold up? So Zach, this is actually a perfect example. That he was talking about flashlights. So the perfect is I like literally I had to Google it just to be sure, right? So you were absolutely right. Atomic, the UK would consider it a flashlight. The US might look at it as like a torch, a handheld wooden torch. So I think this comes down to Zach, whoever is your intended audience, that's who you're writing this for. If you're writing for a UK audience, then you keep torch the way it is. If you're writing for a US audience, go flashlight. If you're writing for an international audience, then do flashlight because flashlight is just clear, right? You could refer to it as a torch, but I would do the torch and then do a description of what it looks like. That's another easy way to go around it. You describe it very early on, right? She brought the torch out. It was an electric flashlight that flickered and it was the new design, right? You could do it very easily. And if you set it up in the beginning, oh, that a flashlight is a torch, you get both audiences. So, but especially in the digital age, because we don't know who's going to pick up our story, I always try to think, as long as you're writing in for an English speaking audience, make it as accessible as possible. All right. And then you get into the story itself. All three of them were supercharged with excitement at the Mexican Department of Antiquities, allowing a license for the 3-week research. Okay. So you just need to hear this. So all three of them were supercharged with excitement at the Mexican Department of Antiquities, allowing a license for the 3-week research expedition, especially as a preliminary reconnaissance trip had discovered several Mayan ceremonial artifacts lying more feet into the first chamber. That's one sentence. Run-on sentence. So you want to make sure that a really good practice is if you can't say the sentence in one breath, it's a run-on sentence. So there's just a couple of opportunities where it just would require some editing down because these are things that you want the reader to know, but I would either separate them up into separate sentences, or you do use a comma, add a couple more commas to make it, to draw it out a little bit. I think I would split them up though. Okay. I like your setup for the story. And just remember that you only use quotation marks if a character is speaking. You would use apostrophes like that and italics. I love the world building here. The world building is fun. And remember with that dialogue that anytime a character speaks, it's a new needs to be a new paragraph. Actually, I would start here, since this is technically the speech tag. Jake had insisted that they pressed on. Perfect. And then that would be the way to do that. Anytime a new character speaks, we always want to make sure it's its own paragraph like that. I kind of went back and forth on this. I was like, Jake's final moment sadly had not been in keeping with his handsome, boyish, playful demeanor. I went back and I was like, I don't know how I felt about setting that, because you're essentially using his death as a foreshadowing. I kind of went back and forth. As a reader, I don't know if you like that. I mean, I know why you're doing it, because you're setting it up. But for me, I would rather his death be sudden. Tommy has a good call out. Is his demeanor handsome? Sadly, not been keen with his handsome, boyish, playful demeanor. He could have a boyish demeanor. He could have a playful demeanor. Can you have a handsome demeanor? Not quite. So I would just edit that. That's a good call out, Atomic. Let's see. I would say Jake's. Yeah, so I was like, I don't know if I liked using his final I personally don't like using this as a foreshadowing, because you just set up, and it's because literally you're about to quote unquote push him off the cliff. I would much rather have the surprise be him falling off the cliff, but that's debatable. That's a subjective decision. That's just a reader's thought. And remember, same thing with dialogue. Nope, that's not what we want. That's the dialogue's being weird here. All right, never mind. Just make sure with dialogue that it is new speaker, new paragraph. The dialogue is being weird here. All right, whatever. Okay. So there's that. I like his descriptions here. Yeah, so I think what you need to do, Zach, you need to brush up on dialogue rules and speech tags, because you're missing a lot of dialogue opportunities, and it just makes it harder to read. So I would just say brush up on dialogue and speech tag rules. Because that's more of a structural one. The actions were good. The action itself worked. This was great. This was literally perfect. That worked out really great. I love this moment. And I like this. Basically, Lauren is chasing after Jess. I think my biggest challenge with the characters between Jess and Lauren is they both kind of feel like the same character to me. Right now, I don't really have a distinguishing factor on who is Jess as a character and who is Lauren. Right now, they just both seem like two really cute girls who are really into Jake. Jake's character is clear, and it's not because he's a guy. It's because of his fascination with this prank and this Mayan stuff, and the research makes him unique. The way you would go about that is make a couple decisions on who is Jess and then who is Lauren, and then provide them early on when they're getting into here, because you do a good job in setting up the trip, and I'm clear on the trip and why they're doing it. I just need another paragraph on who is Lauren and who is Jess, and I would primarily focus on the one that survives. which is Lauren, because the question is, who is the protagonist? Whose story are we following? And I think right now the challenge, and this is probably the thing that's hurting the story right now, there's no clear protagonist in the story. And that's what's hurting the story. Because right now you're having this thing happen with Lauren, which she's the one who fell. I'm like, okay, so Lauren's the protagonist. And then you have Lauren, Jess, and Jake, and this is the group, and that's fine. But then Lauren is the one. Let's wait, hold on. Lauren, terrified, climbing around in the darkness. Yep. Lauren's the one. I just want to make sure I'm clear here. Okay, no. Yeah, no. Okay, you were fine on that. For some reason I thought you mentioned Jess running. I think it's just making clear who Lauren and Jess are. That's probably why I was confused, because I don't have a clear picture of who Lauren is. This is good with Lauren chasing after her and chasing after Jess. And I think also, Zach, something to be aware of is the piece is probably ready for a line edit as well. It just needs to be edited down on descriptions. There's just a lot of points which are like wordy, which I don't have time to do in a live stream. For example, following Jess's tracks was not as hard as Lauren had feared. The floor of the caves, after all, had lain undisturbed for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Following Jess's tracks was not as hard as Lauren had feared. The floor of the caves, after all, had lain undisturbed for hundreds, if not that. So how do we know that, right? So because this is the narrator who's interjecting into Jess's POV. So I would say following Jess's tracks was not as hard as Lauren had feared. As she ran, or while running, Lauren could tell the ground hadn't been disturbed in hundreds of years. Right? So that's clear, right? When the narrator interjects like that, it pulls me out of or it can pull a reader out of the story. So you see a lot of the story just needs line editing like that to make things clear. Maybe a little developmental editing, but more line and copy editing. But this is good. And then I think the transition, so fighting her fear, Lauren continued to follow. This is good. This is good where she's following Jess. So this was confusing. Did Lauren fall as well? So Lauren looked over, she reeled back in terror and fell. So did she fall down the pit? I think this just wasn't clear here. So I would say we want to clean that up a little bit. But this is good. It's interesting. I love what you do with the story. This has been that Lauren had dropped the torch. Now, right, so you see, this is the moment that Lauren had dropped the torch. Now, instead of doing this, there's actually a better way to do this. You actually want to have a specific action that you can call back to. So in the beginning of the story, Lauren, terrified, fumbled around in the darkness, cursing her clumsiness, blah, blah, blah. There's all that. And then however you end this off, Lauren held up the torch. Lauren held up the torch as it flickered in her face. This is just an example, right? So basically what you do is you use an action, because this is clear that we're going in the past. You use an action, and now that we're back at this moment, which is down here, instead of doing that, you do this, and now you go back to the action. Lauren, the torch flickered. The torch continued to flicker in Lauren's face as she recollected the past, recollected their journey thus far. Then you let the audience draw the conclusion of, okay, this is the present moment now. That's a good way to go about it. And then I think what's confusing about this is you hop into Jess's POV, but I thought Jess was dead. And basically you're saying, okay, she didn't die, she's just alive. So I would actually, because you go back to the present moment, I wouldn't go to Jess at all. I would actually go back to Lauren. I would stick with Lauren and have Lauren continue on. That would be my recommendation. Yeah, because Lauren daring not to breathe. Yeah, I would honestly just stick with Lauren. Unless you're wanting Jess, unless Jess comes out later in the story and she's going to be all right. Because I see what you're trying to do, right? Basically, we're thinking all the characters are dead, but they're not. They're there. They're just not dead. And then Jake, I was like, okay, Jake's not dead. He's actually alive. But the problem is you bring him back to life. He's not dead to basically tell us what happened, which is great. But then it's like, oh, but he's actually dead. It kind of makes the ending feel bittersweet because you brought him back to life just for us to see that he's actually dead, which makes us feel like you literally only you only kept him alive because you wanted to tell the reader that there was a prank. My recommendation would have Jake try to escape, right? If he's at the bottom, like, why would he just give up and hope it was futile? No, anybody who he would try to live, unless his like leg is torn apart and he's literally unable to move and spitting up blood, Jake knew he would never see daylight again. I would actually rather that Jake try to move and he try to get out of the cave. Maybe he see Jess fall in the distance and then he dies, right? Because it gives us a little bit of hope. And then we end on this. So yeah, but Zach, that's all that I got for you, my man. That's all the feedback I got. Overall, it was a really cool little like horror thriller story. And I think the ending was a very nice I wasn't expecting that. I thought Zach was dead. And the fact that it was all prank and there was nothing supernatural, like, great job. That was fun. I like that type of story. So really great work, Zach. Thanks again for submitting that. And I hope that brings you value. All right. And let's hop back over here. Yeah, Zach, this is another good point. Who was running in the wrong direction? I think it was just clarifying, right? There's a couple of moments where we need to clarify who our point of view is and who you're referring to with characters. Awesome. That was perfect. So that was good. All right, what do we got next? Let me check over here. All right, bear with me just a second, fam, as I pull up the next submission. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. Let's see. I have an excerpt here. All right, so I have a very brief excerpt here. Let's see. Originally, I was going to do another reader, but they wanted to move it to next week. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open up a new one, and I'm just pulling up my next submission that I have in here. And this one's actually super short, so this should be easy. Let's see, bear with me. Uno momento while I set it up on my end. All right, perfect. I am all good. So I just have a brief little excerpt here. Let me pull up StreamYard again. I have a brief little excerpt here for Vaughn. I got an excerpt from Vaughn. It looks like we got a little creative writing. writing story by Vaughn. All right, Vaughn, I got a little creative writing excerpt. We got a brief little story here. I wanted to get through this. Perfect. And I know you're here in the chat. Wonderful. All right, beautiful. So let me get this pulled up. Perfect. And then this one is a brief little excerpt. It looks like it doesn't have a name, but we're just going to say it looks like it's about love. All right, so I got it all set on my end. I don't even think it will need a timer. So let me pull it up. Awesome. So this is just a creative writing story by Vaughn. Perfect. And by the way, like this is always a really good call out. If you ever just want to send shorter pieces as well, it makes it able for me to get through more. So that was awesome. Perfect. All right, so we have creative writing story by Vaughn. I am all set. I don't even think we'll need the timer for this one. Okay. The air was filled with the soft gurgles and laughter of little Theo, about to mark his first circle around the sun. Vaughn watched, his heart swelling with pride and a tinge of sorrow, as his sister Victoria cradled her son. The room was a canvas of exhaustion and joy, painted with the strokes of a new mother's love and the fatigue that clung to her like a shadow. Chris, the brother in law, was the unsung hero of the hour, arriving like a gentle breeze at noon, ready to take over the reins of baby duties. His presence was a quiet treatment to the shared journey of parenthood, a dance of support and understanding that left no room for applause, yet deserved it all. As Vaughn and Victoria exchanged words, the conversation meandered through the valleys of Vaughn's health, exploring the landscape of treatment options and the rugged terrain of hope. Vaughn, ever the guardian, tiptoed around the edges of Theo's world, careful not to stir the waters of overstimulation, as Chris ushered the little one into the arms of sleep. The moment of departure was a whisper of unspoken words. Chris's "I love you" hung in the air, a lifeline thrown across the chasm of Vaughn's struggles. And though Vaughn's reply was a simple, "Thanks, man," his heart ached to echo the sentiment, to let the words, "I love you too," sail across the divide to Chris and Victoria, even if just a silent whisper carried away by the wind. I think this is just a fun little excerpt. What I love about it is that there's a very clear theme on Vaughn's love with his family. Now, this is a really great example for the type of writer where if you're writing based off your experiences and you're treating it more as a journaling or as a nonfiction type story, this is great. So I think what I liked is you're basically looking at the couple, Victoria and Chris, the brother-in-law. You're basically looking at them through Vaughn's point of view, through the perspective. What you do well is there's a couple areas here where you're using a description. The room was a canvas of exhaustion and joy. The room was a canvas of exhaustion and joy. I think that works. That works as a description. Painted with the strokes of a new mother's love and the fatigue that clung to her like a shadow. I like that. I think that's an interesting use of description to give me the feel of like, okay, so basically they're new parents. And it makes me want to be like, okay, so I want to know like a little bit more. Are there any specific things that suggest why um suggest why it's a mess? Other than that, she's just a new mother. You can tell this is about little Theo. I think I almost want a couple more mentions of Theo in here since the story is essentially about him. It's really so you could actually almost argue that Theo about to mark his first circle around the sun. You could actually almost argue that Theo is the protagonist. Let's see. Chris, the brother-in-law, was the unsung hero of the hour. Take over the reins of baby duties. Yep. So that's the dad, and I like your description again. His presence was a quiet testament to the shared journey of parenthood. And I think that's fun, right? I think that's direct and that's very clear of like a dance of support and understanding that left no room for applause, yet deserved it all. I think that's great. Like, I think that works. I really like that. As Vaughn and Victoria exchanged words, the conversation meandered through the valleys of Vaughn's health, exploring the landscape of treatment options and the rugged terrain of hope. So I think that the challenge with this is because now where the values of Vaughn's health, exploring the landscape of treatment options in the rugged terrain of hope, there is so much to this that by touching on it, now like we need to know a little bit more as it pertains to the story. And right now, the story is about Theo and Vaughn's perception of Theo. So I would actually minimize this portion in this story and more talk about their conversation through their conversation around Theo and what it means to be a new mother, Vaughn ever the guardian, or you can go through the treatment options, but then you need to explore this a little more, right? This needs to have its own paragraph and how that pertains of like, oh, Vaughn has to go through treatment options but as he looks at Theo, he keeps in mind he wants to be the guardian and he's worried that he won't be there for Theo. Right. So if you go that option, you just want to tie it back to how it pertains to Theo. Yeah, I didn't do the timer glide because it's such a short story. I know that I wasn't going to need the timer for this. And then also make sure that oh no, this is the moment of departure was a whisper's unspoken words. Chris's I love you hung in the air. A lifeline thrown across the chasm of Vaughn's struggles. Oh, this is so sweet. This is really sweet. Chris's I love you hung in the air. I'm asking myself if I would still use quotations on this because technically Chris said this, but he said this in the past tense. Interesting. I actually have to research. I'm not sure if you would use quotations. And then you could actually just go that. So Chris's I love you hung in the air. I think this might be the way to do it. I'd have to research because it's different if we're like Chris said I love you and then you would use quotations, but because it's said as an idea, I think this is the correct way to do it, but I would just research that. Yeah, your descriptions in this are really fun. The metaphors are really well done, Vaughn. I think that's one of the things I really like about this. And this is interesting. So this little short story itself goes back to Vaughn's struggles, which is interesting. I think the only challenge, at least with this story specifically, is we start off with Theo and the family. So it's almost like the piece starts off with Theo and the family, and then it changes to Vaughn and his struggles, which are good. As a journal entry, this is perfect, right? Because we don't have to have a beginning, middle, and end. As a short story, if I were to like refine this or develop this into a short story, what I would do is I would make the Theo the main arc. So I would touch again upon how like when Vaughn leaves, he like looks back at Theo and he thinks back to his struggles. And then I would use Vaughn's struggles as like the secondary arc of the story. right? And how Vaughn dealing with his struggles makes him think about the hope with Theo. And I think you could do that easily by just tying it back to Theo and then touching upon his love for Theo in the middle. So, yeah, that's all that I got for you, though, man. Thanks for sharing that. That was a super cool little creative writing piece. Super cool. Really appreciate that. All right. Wonderful. 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 We got some absolutely great stories in. I feel like I got some really great writing pieces in. All right. So with where we're at, let's see. Let me hop back into the stream. All right, so let's see. We're hopping back in. Hey, what's up, Aubrey? Welcome to the stream. Welcome, welcome. We actually just were wrapping up some stories. Welcome to the Story and Critique Show. We've had some really great stories today. Make sure that if you missed out, Aubrey, to go check it out from the beginning after the stream ends. All right. So with where we're at next, what we're going to do is we're going to pivot now into getting our daily writing sprint done. I got some writing to do, but if you're like, you know what, I'm not really feeling like a writing sprint and you're looking for something to watch next, in the video description on YouTube, check out the playlist Reading Sprints for Storytellers. Is the most popular episodes of previous story and critique shows. Definitely go check it out. We've had some really great stories done throughout the previous episodes. So make sure you go check that out if you're looking for something to go watch. I've linked the playlist in the YouTube video description below. Awesome. And then also, don't forget, tap that like button. If you're getting value out of this, tap the like button. If you were because we got our music queued up and it's time to hop into our daily writing sprint. Awesome. And by the way, if you want to join in on the writing sprint, feel free to. Let's say you're feeling like super creative and very motivated right now. You could come join me. We're going to do an easy 20-minute writing sprint. Super simple. You can work on brainstorming, writing, editing, or anything in between. While I work on my story, The Last Scarecrow. Or let's say you're not feeling like writing and creation right now. You can sit back and relax, and I'll write vicariously for the both of us. All right, and I got my screen set up. Perfect. You guys know how I'm doing with Last Scarecrow? 75%. Woo! Oh my goodness. 74%, 92,000 words. Woo! Oh man. I'm at an intense part too. They're kind of we're almost at an intense part. Let's see if we can get there today. All right, so I got 20 minutes on the clock. Great question, Aubrey. I'm working on let me change back to this. So here's a brief little description of my story, The Last Scarecrow, if you want to get a better understanding of what I'm working on. I like to throw up this little brief excerpt. Make sure that we can actually see it. Perfect. And that's this is just a brief excerpt about Last Scarecrow, my story. And then this is the chapter where we're at. We're actually just got to the next chapter. Did I title the next chapter? I forgot. The Graveyard of the Last. Let's go with The Last Puzzle. Hey, let's do that for now. Scarecrow, Pebbles, Stretch, and Gore. Have broken the illusion over the graveyard and now must locate the magic to stop. the first demon. Perfect. That is where we're at. That's our summary. All right. And I know. Thanks so much, LeMay. I'm super excited. Okay. I am all ready. All right. We got 20 minutes on the clock. And it's time to write now. Awesome. Thanks, Zach. Thanks for the heads up. I'm glad you got value out of it. That's awesome. All right. And writing sprint over. Wonderful. I feel like that was a really good writing sprint on my part. It took me like a couple of minutes to try to get into it, but then when I started, once I got like 5 minutes in, then I was like kind of on a roll and I felt like the wording was coming. I almost feel like I should have done like a 30-minute sprint today because I feel like I was getting into the story a little bit. This probably just means I think tomorrow okay. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I feel like I was able to get a good headway into the scene. I'm thinking about what's the thing that's going to help them uncover the secret, and we'll get to explore that tomorrow. So fun stuff. Definitely making some good progress. Awesome. Zach, glad you were able to get some value out of it. Your story was a lot of fun to read. Thanks for submitting it. And yeah, absolutely, Zach. Also, make sure that if you want to if you want future excerpts read, just give me a heads up. Let me know through a message or through email. I do this story critique show every single Saturday. So we'll be here. Feel free to come join in on the fun. Awesome. I'm glad that you enjoyed the process. It'll help me in my future revisions and future writing. Also, thanks for the fun conversation, guys. Looking forward to joining you guys next week. Yeah, glad it was great having you. And I want to absolutely say thanks for being active in the comments. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you had a great time, my man. I always love doing our critique show. I love going through all the stories, and it's just a cool experience. Now, as I look towards tomorrow, normally Sundays is the podcast. I'm taking a break this week from the podcast. Tomorrow's stream, I might do something fun. I have to think about it. I have to think about if I want to set up for it. I might do a live event. We'll see. I'll advertise it in the morning. Otherwise, I might just do some writing sprints. I'm kind of at this point with Last Scarecrow where I realize the section of the story I need to actually get into it if I'm going to get through it, because I'm at kind of building up to an intense part that's about to happen. So kind of realizing that now as I'm working on it. Oh, mommy, I'm really glad. I'm really glad that the story reworking has helped out a lot. You have some really great and fun stories yourself. I'm glad it's helping, and I'm eager to dig into the next sections when you're in future shows. All right. And that is all that I got for you today, creative writers. Remember, if you're looking for something to watch next, hop into the Reading Sprints for Storytellers playlist in the YouTube description. And don't forget, tap that like button on your way out. Let me know that you got value from the stream. And we will be back tomorrow for some writing sprints and maybe some fun. And that is all that I got for you. Yeah, Sean, you'll have to catch it on the rewatch, my man. All right, my friends. Well, that is the stream for you today. Don't forget, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kaufman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative.